Hi everybody, welcome to Unit 5, Video 4. If you don't have your notes packets out, please go ahead and get it. All right, so we're on page 5, number 4 here, where it says, I can simplify products and quotients of binomials that contain radicals. Okay, so we've already done this when we've had expressions like x plus 3 times x plus 2. So our same rule apply. We're going to use the distributive property. Sometimes you guys call it FOIL. I like to do distributive property. So when I distribute here, I'm going to get 5 times 3 is 15. Then when I distribute the 5, remember, since this 3 is underneath the radical, you can't multiply it by the 5, but the 5 can multiply by the coefficient, which is 2. So this is going to be plus 10 rad 3. When I do my inside term here, I have, remember there's an implied 1, so if you want to put that 1, you can. So when you distribute here, you're saying negative 1 times 3, so it's negative 3 rad 3. And then when you distribute to this last term here, you get negative 2 rad 9. So now we're going to simplify what we can. So I'm going to bring down the 15. 10 rad 3 minus 3 rad 3 is going to give me plus 7 rad 3. And here I have negative 2 times 3 because the square root of 9 is 3. So I need to simplify that. So I have 15 plus 7 rad 3 minus 6. So then now I can combine the 15 and the negative 6, which is going to give me a 9 plus 7 rad 3. And this is an expression. They're not like terms, so you can't combine them. So you leave them alone. All right. So see how at this point when we said rad 3 times rad 3 was the square root of 9, and the square root of 9 is 3, you're eventually going to want to skip this step and go straight to the 3. But for right now, if you want to write all the steps, you can, but eventually you're going to skip that step, like I'll show you here. So with this one, we're going to start by distributing the 4. So we get 4 times 4 is 16. Then when I distribute to the last term, I get negative 4 rad 3. The middle term, I get a positive 4 rad 3. And here, when I distribute, positive times a negative gives me a negative. Rad 3 times rad 3 is the square root of 9, which I know is just 3. So now when I combine my like terms, I have 16 minus 3, which is 13. And negative 4 rad 3 and positive 4 rad 3 are going to cancel out. So I'm left with 13. And if you noticed on these two, they were the same numbers, except one was positive and one was negative. So that's why your middle term canceled out there. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next page. So whenever you have something like number 3, remember when you have the quantity squared here, you have to write it out twice. You do not just distribute that square. You want to write it out twice and then do your distribution method. So we have 4 rad 2 plus rad 3 times 4 rad 2 plus rad 3. Okay, so again, when you distribute here, the coefficients, you have 4 times 4 is 16 times rad 2 times rad 2 is just 2. When I distribute to this last term here, I get plus 4 rad 6. When I do this inside term, I get plus 4 rad 6. And when I do this last term, rad 3 times rad 3 gives me plus 3. So now I need to simplify. 16 times 2 gives me 32. 4 rad 6 plus 4 rad 6 gives me 8 rad 6. And I have this plus 3. So now I can combine 32 and 3. So I get 35 plus 8 rad 6. And this is my answer. Oops. All right, so when you're ready, I want you to try number 4. Remember, write it out twice and distribute. So pause the video and solve it. Okay, so let's see how you did. Hopefully we got 14 minus 6 rad 5. All right, so the next type of problem we're looking at here, we have these fractions, 1 over 4 minus rad 15. And we know that we're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator. But you're not allowed to just multiply rad 15 to the top and the bottom. And the reason is because 4 minus rad 15 is an expression. Remember, they're connected by this operation of subtraction. So they're bounded by this invisible set of parentheses, which means I need to multiply it by something so that the radical goes away. So if you take a look at the last 4 problems that we just did, there was one of them, when you multiplied it out, it had no radicals left, nothing. It was just a whole number. So if you look through your notes, that was number 2. And if you notice number 2, you had the same thing, except one was positive and one was negative, a plus sign and a minus sign. So that's what we call the conjugate. So here you have 4 minus rad 15. So the conjugate would be 4 plus rad 15. And when we multiply by this, the first and the last term are going to cancel out. I mean, the middle term is going to cancel out. So you're left with just a whole number. So let's go ahead and I'm going to show you how to do this. So remember, what you do to 1 to the bottom, you have to do the top. So I'm going to distribute here. Since I'm distributing at 1, it's not going to change anything. So I'm left with 4 plus rad 15. In the denominator, again, when I distribute here, 4 times 4 is 16. When I distribute this one, I get plus 4 rad 15. When I distribute here, I get minus 4 rad 15. And the last term, I'm going to get negative 15. So now if you notice, positive 4 rad 15 and negative 4 rad 15 cancel. So I'm left with just 16 minus 15. So in the numerator, I have 4 plus rad 15. In the denominator, 16 minus 15 is 1. So I don't need to write this one. I can just write it as 4 plus rad 15. So then that's my final answer. All right, so hopefully you've noticed something about when you multiplied by the conjugate and earlier when you did number 2. You'll notice that these middle terms always cancel out, and that's because these are the same thing except one is positive, one is negative, so there is no middle term, which means when you multiply, you can take a shortcut. You just need to multiply the first term together and the last term together. So let's try that with this one. So again, remember, these are in parentheses. It's an expression. They're grouped together. So we multiply the conjugate. The conjugate is the same thing with the opposite sign. So we have parentheses rad 2 minus rad 3. And we're going to do that to the top and the bottom. Okay, so on the top, when we distribute here, we're going to get rad 6 minus, well, rad 3 times rad 3 is just 3, so minus 3. On the bottom, remember, I already know the middle term is going to cancel, so I'm just going to multiply the first term. So rad 2 times rad 2 is just 2, and the last term together. So rad 3 times a negative rad 3 is just minus 3. So then when I simplify here, I get rad 6 minus 3 over 2 minus 3, which is negative 1. And so you can leave it like this, or if you simplify it and apply the negative to both of them, I'm just going to switch the order when I do this. So negative 3 divided by 3 would end up with a positive 3, and rad 6 divided by a negative 1 would be a negative rad 6. So then this is also an acceptable answer too. So, all right, and this is 3. Let me make that a little better. Okay, so when we go to the next one, number 7 here, I want you to pause the video and try number 7. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how you did. So with this one, once we got to this point here, 3 rad 5 minus 3 rad 2 over 3, remember, this is an expression, 3 rad 5 minus 3 rad 2. There's an invisible set of parentheses. So if they have a GCF to factor out, that's going to reduce with something on the bottom or the denominator, you should. And in this case, you could factor out a 3 out of both of them. So once you factored out that 3, the 3 in the numerator and the 3 in the denominator are going to cancel. So then you're just left with radical 5 minus radical 2. All right. So again, I want you to pause the video and try number 8. Okay, so let's see how you did. So when we distributed here, remember, these on the top, they look similar because they are the same because they both have rad 5 plus rad 2, rad 5 plus rad 2. So when you distribute, you are going to get a middle term, where the ones on the bottom, it's the conjugate. One's positive and one's negative, so the middle term cancels out. Okay, so what we've been doing so far was that single fraction. For these next ones here, if you notice, you're multiplying these fractions. And we already know the rules of multiplying fractions is we multiply straight across. But you always want to look for things that could help you. So if you notice right now, in the first fraction, you have rad 2 plus 3. And in the second fraction, you have rad 2 minus 3, which means that these are conjugates of one another. So we can take that shortcut when we do the multiplication straight across. I know I only need to multiply the first terms together, which is going to give me 2, and the last terms together, which is going to give me negative 9. On the bottom, 3 times 2 is going to give me 6, And then here I can just simplify my numerator first. So 2 minus 9 gives me negative 7 over 6. Nothing else can reduce. So then that's your answer. All right, so let's go ahead with number 10. So again, if you notice in the numerator, they're both the conjugates of one another. So go ahead and pause the video and you try this one. Okay, so hopefully we both got 1/2. Remember, you always want to simplify completely. So 2 over 4 is simplified to 1/2. All right, so this next one, they have this function here, and it's asking us to plug in. So we want to find 1 minus rad 2. So remember, we have to start by saying f of 1 minus rad 2. So whenever we see an x, that's for plugging in 1 minus rad 2. So since x is in the numerator, I have 1 minus rad 2. On the denominator, I have x plus 1. So I need to say 1 minus rad 2 plus 1. So now, before I can simplify or anything, you have to combine like terms in the denominator. So my next step here, I would get 1 minus rad 2 over, well, 1 plus 1 would give me 2 minus rad 2. And remember, these are expressions. There's invisible parentheses around them. You cannot just simplify rad 2 because this is bounded by a set of parentheses. So we need to multiply by the conjugate. So here we have 2 plus rad 2. So the top and the bottom, so 2 plus rad 2. So then let's go ahead and distribute that and combine our like terms. So here we're going to get 2. Here we're going to get plus rad 2. Then we get minus 2 rad 2. And then minus 2. In the denominator, it's the conjugate, so we only have to do the first term, so that's 4. And then here, minus 2. So then let's simplify this one. 2 and negative 2 are going to cancel. So rad 2 minus 2 rad 2 gives me negative rad 2. And then in denominator, 4 minus 2 is just 2. Okay, so then let's write our final answer over here. So we have f of 1 minus rad 2 would equal negative rad 2 over 2. So this is my answer here. Okay, and so let's look at the last one. So again, we're simplifying. And again, you want to look and see, do I notice anything? And in this one, you do. You notice that they're the same thing, except one is positive, one is negative. So again, it's the conjugate. So we can take our rules of multiplying. So we know we only need to multiply the first and the last term. So when I distribute here, I know when I multiply these two radicals together, I'm going to get just what was in underneath the radical. So I can pull that out right away. So this is just going to turn into n plus 1. When I distribute here, same thing, except I have a positive and a negative. So this is going to give me minus n. So now that I have this, I can just combine my like terms. So n and negative n are going to cancel. So I'm left with positive 1. So then that's my answer, 1. Watching the video.